It is 5:14 Eastern here in the early evening hours on Monday, January 6th. Welcome inside the channel. I'm Bobby Trosset, and as always, this is where I bring you Baltimore sports and beyond. Today's live stream is brought to you by my friends at right here at the Bobby Baltimore Discord server. It's a 24/7 conversation surrounding Baltimore sports. It is a hub for conversation, and it's a great community that has over 600 members in it. So you can join for free by clicking on the link that's included as a pinned comment over there in the live chat. What we're working towards, of course, is Super Wild Card Weekend, and that'll be Saturday, January 11th for the Ravens, who will kickstart the weekend with an 8 o'clock Eastern start time, prime time, under the lights. Ravens-Steelers, the third time, of course, that these two teams will meet up in this season. For Baltimore, pretty simple. You win, and you're on to the divisional round, and likely a matchup on the road in Buffalo, barring an upset. From there, you'll likely, again, this is all just percentages-wise, odds-wise, you'll then have to go through Kansas City, and boy, oh boy, you do those two things, it will have been earned a trip to the Super Bowl in New Orleans. As we just learned a short while ago, unsurprisingly, the Chicago Bears put in a request to interview the current Ravens offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, for their next head coaching position. Todd, an Illinois native, originally from not far outside Chicago. Of course, 2 years in to a stellar tenure in Baltimore. We'll go through the numbers in just a bit, but Coach Monken has come in and completely transformed this Ravens offense and brought it to new heights with Lamar Jackson, of course, as the centerpiece. And now, as a result, I wouldn't expect this to be the last. This is just the first slip that's been put in by a team that has a head coaching vacancy for Todd Monken. Now, since the Ravens play this week, Saturday to be exact, Todd cannot, by rule, speak to any team until next week. And I believe the first round of interviews are to be taking place virtually. So it'd probably be a Zoom call type of interview for Todd Monken with the Chicago Bears, who, of course, is it an enticing job? You would think so, given all the talent, but there's just been constant dysfunction for decades with the Bears. You've got a guy in Caleb Williams, the number one overall pick from just a year ago, who I'm sure many coordinators that are out there waiting for their opportunity, makes it very, very enticing. Obviously, Matt Eberflus started the year as the head coach of the Chicago Bears, and that experiment did not work out really well and came to a screeching halt several weeks back. There are other names that are in on this search aside from Todd Monken, by the way. Mike McCarthy, head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, apparently has been requested. Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. Of course, Detroit just locked up the top overall seed on the NFC side as the postseason gets ready to get set. Also, Aaron Glenn, Lions defensive coordinator, and Miami's DC, Anthony Weaver, who is the former John Harbaugh assistant, are all reported targets, at least for interviews, at the very least, with Chicago. So it's not just Todd Monken, but again, this is the first of potentially several interview requests that Todd Monken could very well receive, being that he got plenty this time last year as well, given what he did in a short amount of time for the Ravens. But the here and now, oh my goodness, what a second year it was. And as Dan Orlovsky tallied up, the most yards per rush in a season is now owned by the 2024 Ravens. 5.76 rushing yards. And I should say yards per rush in a single season. That beats by just a couple fractions of a point here the 1963 Browns by 0.2 of a fraction there. The most yards per play in a season, look at where the Ravens rank, 2024, third to the 1954 Rams and the 2000 Rams. The highest passer rating in a season, as we know, Lamar owns that number, or at least a top 4 ranking behind Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers. And of course, the king, Derrick Henry, who just turned 31 over the weekend. 1,921 rushing yards are most in a season by a player that did not win a rushing title. And of course, that went to Saquon Barkley, who eclipsed the 2,000 mark and had a darn good chance. He was 101 rushing yards away entering the final week to pass the single season record owned by Eric Dickerson. But of course, Philly chose to sit him. Not to mention Zay Flowers, his first Pro Bowl nod. He goes for over 1,000 yards. Not to mention a career year for Rashad Bateman in season number 4. 9 touchdowns, over 750 receiving yards. Mark Andrews had double-digit touchdowns. Justice Hill was a key part of this offense. I mean, you can go on and on and on, up and down this offensive lineup and point to areas in which Todd Monken has had his fingers and his fingertips all over it. What about Lamar? A potential MV3 frontrunner, depending on where voters stand. Ballots are due by Wednesday, by the way, for NFL MVP. He became the first player in NFL history with 40-plus passing touchdowns and 4 or fewer picks. He also became the first player in NFL history with 40-plus passing touchdowns and 600-plus rushing yards. He's the first player in NFL history with 4,000-plus passing yards and 800-plus rushing yards. Shall I continue? He's the first player in NFL history to average 8.5 yards per pass and 6 yards per carry in the same season. And of course, notably, when you think about some of the other candidates that are going up with him head-to-head for this award, he was 3-0, unbeaten against Josh Allen and Joe Burrow in games that he threw 10 total passing touchdowns and 0 picks. It's about as flawless as you could possibly get, and I referenced this statistic just a short while ago. The 4th best single-season passer rating in NFL history, 119.6. Awfully good company to be behind Peyton Manning and the great Aaron Rodgers. If you're just tuning in, Todd Monken has been requested by the Chicago Bears to interview for their head coaching vacancy. Matt Eberflus left that post via dismissal within the last month or so. And that is where we stand right now, reacting to that breaking news from Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. The Ravens offense averaged over 6.8 yards per play this season, 6.84 to be exact. That's the second best mark in NFL history. He's going to get other looks, guys. This was a historic group, a historic performance, and one that came in his second season as the play caller. He's going to get looks. And at the very least, teams are going to want to talk with him and talk to him and pick his brain. The Ravens finished with the number 4 most efficient offense since 1978, according to DVOA, which again tracks efficiency, overall performance. Aaron Schatz is the creator of it. The list has every team that ever finished above 30% on offense. And look at where the Ravens stand, 12-5, a DVOA percentage of 35.1. They were the number 1 ranked red zone group. They were the top rushing attack pretty much all year long. And at times, a top 10, top 5 passing attack. This had balance written all over it. And I think Todd Monken deserves a ton of credit. He is likable. He is loose in media sessions. He empowers his players. He has come in and brought Lamar and this overall offense to new heights. And that is one of the many reasons why Chicago has become the first team to request to interview him. You know, remember one of the things that we were talking about when he was first hired and what he was going to be tasked with? And that was empowering Lamar Jackson. And my, oh my, has he done all that and more. He has unlocked Lamar Jackson. And you think about the flexibility, the creative freedom, everything that he's given him at the line of scrimmage has allowed Lamar to showcase his full scale and set of talents, right? The processing of the game. the checks, the film study, the diagnosing, you name it. Lamar has become a student of the game. And as a passer, Lamar is at the top of this MVP conversation as a passer. And in 2 short years, Todd Monken's been at the epicenter of all of that. That's what's going on. 2 super chats have come in thus far. If you're just tuning in, again, Todd Monken has been requested to be interviewed for a second consecutive offseason by at least one team, and that is the Chicago Bears, just to get started. Not a fan writes, it needs to be investigated on why none of Kansas City's coaches ever get poached during this amazing run they have. Does Spags not want to advance his career? Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure Matt Nagy's being looked at this hiring cycle. And as far as Spags is concerned, he's definitely had looks, but yeah, you do wonder how much he feels like he's got something special going on there under Andy Reid. And of course, alongside Patrick Mahomes, you do wonder. He's got an extensive history of defensive coordinator resumes. But it is funny. It seems as if they've actually remained relatively stable. And you think about it. One thing that I think John Harbaugh does not get enough credit for is the way that he cultivates coaching talent and the way that he builds his staff out. It's not easy to start from scratch. And I know it was overdue when Greg Roman was ultimately dismissed. But to be here 2 years later with Todd Monken, when they casted a wide net and looked at a number of different candidates across the league. Dave Canales comes to mind, who's the new head coach of the Carolina Panthers, just finished up his first year with Bryce Young down there. He was one of the candidates when Greg Roman was dismissed. But I think when you look at the lineage, when you look at the tree of the types of coaches that have either gotten their start under John Harbaugh or have ascended under John Harbaugh, and that could be in-house like a Zach Orr or externally like a Mike McDonald, I think he deserves a lot of credit. He's a hell of a hiring manager, and we've seen that with Todd Monken. Now, I'm not saying that Todd was this inexperienced, newly minted dude when he came in. Now, this was a multi-time national championship winning college coordinator from Georgia, somebody who has head coaching experience. And look, I think a lot of you will throw out sometimes what I feel like can be blanket statement comments that almost suggest that guys like Todd Monken maybe don't want to be a head coach. So I'm here to tell you, if you're at the coordinator level at the National Football League, you're probably chasing what everybody's chasing. There's only 32 of them. It's one of the most coveted jobs in the world, the head coach of a National Football League team. I think it's safe to say that Todd Monken is chasing that. That doesn't mean that he wouldn't jump for his first opportunity. It has to be the right opportunity. And of course, what he has right now in Baltimore is pretty darn special. But to think that he's just satisfied with being a coordinator for the rest of his life, I don't buy it. And I know Todd personally. Oceans writes, I have yet to see anyone voting for Allen to point out what he's done better than Lamar. The Bills basically did nothing special offensively with Allen. That from Oceans regarding the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson MVP race, which again will be announced the first week of February at the Super Bowl in New Orleans. And ballots are due this coming Wednesday. I want to say it's at 5 Eastern, perhaps, something along those lines. Appreciate you, Oceans. Appreciate you, not a fan. And so Fly Be More hits me with a super chat and says, that's what happens when you are a great team like the Ravens. Everyone wants to steal your sauce. We're going to retool and come back stronger. Well, here's the deal. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, because, again, I just ripped off a bunch of the candidates that Chicago is rumored to be looking at. Anthony Weaver, Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, Mike McCarthy, Todd Monken now. It doesn't mean that Monken won't emerge as the front runner of that group. Certainly most notably is Mike McCarthy, being that he's a head coach. Ben Johnson's been a hot name in recent years, being that Detroit has just been utterly dominating the NFC. But if you did want to kind of think about in the future, if or when Todd pursues the next gig out there, a name that certainly comes to mind when it comes to an internal promotion is T. Martin. T's been in the system for several years now. He's worked as Lamar Jackson's personal quarterback coach. He is the QB coach here in Baltimore. And I've just been impressed with not only the rapport that he and Lamar appear to have, but the way that T. Martin goes about his business. This is a dude who is a decorated former quarterback himself. It was a non-traditional hire that John Harbaugh chose to make several years ago when he brought him into the building. It was a position that was previously held by James Urban. James is no longer with the organization. But that's certainly a name that if I'm thinking about life after Todd Monken, and again, I hope that the Ravens aren't for their sake, for Lamar's sake. Want to make that clear. But if there's a name that comes to mind, I think it's T. Martin. Who would you guys say? Who's the first name that comes to mind outside Todd Monken when it comes to potentially replacing Todd Monken? And I see Lou saying T. Martin has no play calling experience. That's true. That is true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's incapable, especially with his experience at the position. Go look up his collegiate career. Pretty historic, decorated career. That's a name that comes to mind. King Lee writes Rex Ryan. But here's the thing. Rex isn't taking an offensive coordinator job. He wants a head coach job, and he's rumored to be, I think he's actually mentioned it, that he plans to talk with Woody Johnson and the New York Jets Ownership Council for their next head coach vacancy, a post that he once, of course, owned not all that long ago. And ever since he's been in his TV career at ESPN. Today is brought to you by the Bobby Baltimore Discord server. Many of you have been choosing to join this community in recent weeks. And when you do, you get a member shout out the way that whatever this name is, R at V3N Boy, Raven Boy. Oh, okay. Yeah. Raven Boy. Dr. Dre 84 just joined the server. He's member number 656. So you do get a shout out when you join, and it is free. We talk a little bit of everything. We talk mostly Ravens up in here. We talk Orioles and other baseball related items in here. There's a swag showcase link. I got to do something about the spam bots. I know a lot of you have been reaching out to me about some of the spam bots. I do see you, and I will do something about that. I'm in the middle of tracking down the best option for that without having to add in a moderator. But if you guys would like to join, you can do so for free by clicking on the link that's a pinned comment in the live chat. It's a 24/7 hub for conversation surrounding Baltimore sports. I would love for you guys to join the community. It's a great way to hit me up personally as well and have some interactions there outside of this space on the channel. GA Power Raid says, I'm so lost. Are the players the only personnel under contract? WTF? This is just a simple rule. If you're referring to what Todd Monken is currently in the news about, he is not. The rule is because the Ravens play this week, no team is allowed to directly contact Todd Monken this week. That can start next week. But teams like Chicago can submit a slip, an interview request slip, and that's what they've done, according to Tom Pelissero. B1 and only says, we will never be a dynasty if we lose coaches. You know, it's difficult, but the Ravens have stood the test of time. Withstood the test of time when it comes to the recycling process, or maybe that's not the right word, the retooling process, to use your phrase, in the aftermath of losing coveted candidates like a Mike McDonald. They didn't feel that way a couple months ago when they tabbed 32-year-old Zach Orr to be Mike's replacement. But look at the way that defense finished up the year. And look at the way that pass defense has completely turned this entire thing around from like week 10, week 11 on. Look at the way that this team yet again finds itself among the most sacked defenses across the league. I believe they finished top 2. Let's see what it is now that the regular season's over. NFL sack leaders teams. I want to say they were right at the top, and there they have it. 54 total sacks this year, ranked second league-wide to the Denver Broncos. That's a pretty big deal, especially when you consider the fact that a year ago, they did a first of its kind, leading in the trifecta of categories: points allowed, giveaways, and sacks, leading in all 3 categories. So for them to be top 2 in sacks, have taken the strides that they did over the last month or two from a passing defense standpoint, and that's trickled down into levels 1 and 2. I think Zach deserves credit. Dean Pease deserves credit. Of course, Dean bringing in a sense of calm. Kyle Hamilton being adjusted and moved to the back end certainly deserves his flowers. Ardarius Washington continues to be an incredible unsung hero. Somebody asked me on X earlier today, so now that the regular season's over, who was your dark horse? First name that came to mind, Ardarius Washington. Second name that came to mind, Justice Hill. Those are the 2 names that come to mind when I think about overall dark horses for the regular season. If you guys were to think of one, who is it? Who is your dark horse? We talked about this prior. Who is it afterwards? Who's your dark horse? Let's get to the Zay Flowers news. This came out just a short while ago. And Adam Schefter just added something in that Sarah transcribed just a couple of minutes ago. But as of the 4th, which was over the weekend, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network noted that Zay Flowers is believed to have suffered a knee sprain. And it's not considered a major injury, which is what John Harbaugh confirmed today. But in rather encouraging news, he did refer to it as day-to-day. Again, clarified that it's not a season-ending one. And as Ian wrote, sounds like it will be a challenge this week, but after that, possible. Adam Schefter just a short while ago, and Sarah transcribed this from NFL Live. He reported that the Ravens will see if Zay can make it back in time for this week's game against the Steelers. Sounds like it could be a little challenging. The good part is, it doesn't seem to be a long-term injury. If Baltimore is able to advance, I think he will definitely be back the next week. This is a different team without Zay Flowers. There's no question about it. But if there were ever a year, if there were ever a season that the Ravens were poised and in position to handle this kind of blow, it'd be right now. And a lot of that has to do with this guy, Rashad Bateman, coming off a career year, 9 total touchdowns after tallying 4 combined in his previous 3 seasons. Over 750 receiving yards. John Harbaugh was asked about Rashad earlier today and his ability to lead the wide receiver group with Zay's status in limbo. And he told reporters, quote, "He's always been high on my list. He's always been a tremendous player, athlete, competitor, excellent wide receiver. He's been playing at a high level all year, made big plays for us in that game last week. He was a factor in getting us into scoring position a number of times. And it's not just Rashad. We had a lot of weapons." Well, I'll tell you what. As far as the playmaking ability, I think what you can probably count on, barring something unforeseen, is that the Steelers are going to sell out to take Mark Andrews out of this game. Prior to the second time around this year where they played the Steelers in the middle of that December stretch, the Ravens and Mark Andrews had never Mark Andrews had never scored a touchdown in a hefty sample size of games against the Steelers throughout his career. So keep that in mind. They have kept him in check. And I think it's going to be a big game for Rashad. He's going to be tasked with stretching this defense out, being a reliable route runner, a reliable pair of hands, and of course, an outlet for Lamar. Because you better believe that Pittsburgh's defensive front's going to be flying around and ready to go. Remember, the second time these two teams played, TJ Watt was banged up, and maybe he still is. But even a banged up TJ Watt is a TJ Watt that is worthy of a whole lot of attention. And so when I think about this from a tangible perspective, if I'm Todd Monken, I want to get Rashad involved early. I want to stretch this field. I want to use the middle of the field as well with my tight ends. But more than anything else, I brought Derrick Henry here for a reason. And it wasn't all that long ago, coming up on 12 months, when the Ravens refused. And some of this was game plan. Some of this was the way the game played out. I understand that. But they did not use their calling card nearly enough in that AFC Championship game. There is no forgetting about a first ballot Hall of Famer that is now in your backfield and just put over 1,900 rushing yards on the board and broke about just every single record that you could possibly go after when it comes to his age, his career, so on and so forth for the King. This is what's different about last year. The Ravens have Derrick Henry, and they can wear you down. You look at the numbers of the kind of finisher that he's been in crunch time. I shared that statistic earlier this week within the last couple days. His second half and overtime statistics throughout this season, off the charts. That is exactly why they brought him to Baltimore, and I do not expect that to be an afterthought. And the King himself to be an afterthought when it's all said and done coming up on Saturday. It's an 8 o'clock kickoff inside the bank. If you're just tuning in, Todd Monken has officially been requested for an interview by the Chicago Bears. That's the breaking news, courtesy of Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. Todd, of course, just finished up his second season with the Ravens as their OC, and what a historic year it was. He joins other candidates like Mike McCarthy, the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Lions OC Ben Johnson, their DC Aaron Glenn as well, along with Anthony Weaver in Miami, as the reported targets and or candidates, at least, again, at the very least, for interviews in Chicago. And I'd have to think that that job's pretty enticing. Caleb Williams is a talent. I know, he's a little quirky, seems to have a little bit of maturity issues. But who am I to say that from the outside looking in? It's a tough draw this year. And when you're a rookie and your head coach is fired in season, can't imagine that leads to a lot of continuity, a lot of stability. So again, I'd have to think that that has to be a very, very enticing job given what they have around him as well. Not a Fan writes, Lamar has only played 4 full seasons and could be looking at having his 4th offensive coordinator in his career next year. He won MVP in his first full year with every new offensive coordinator. That is unbelievable to think about. Year 1 with Greg in 2019. And of course, year 1 last year in 2023 with Todd Monken. It's a good observation, Not a Fan. And again, I think it just speaks to how easy it is to work with Lamar, how easy he makes these coordinators' jobs in a sense, and the way that John Harbaugh goes about hiring. Again, I want to keep going back to that. The way that John has gone about the hiring process for his 16-plus seasons in Baltimore is notable. And I don't think that that's talked about enough. So that's what we have right now. And of course, we will continue to follow this. Like I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, Todd Monken cannot speak to the Bears until next week. And when he is able to do so, it has to be a remotely conducted interview. So that is what we have coming up. I appreciate you guys for dropping by. It's a short and condensed live stream. because it's postseason week and there is a lot of planning that I'm doing off the air on the back end, getting ready for what will be a fantastic next couple days as we work our way up towards Super Wild Card weekend and round 3 of Ravens Steelers, with, of course, a chance to go to the divisional round, and that's on the line. I appreciate you guys for dropping by. Please like the video if you haven't already done so. Subscribe to the channel on your way out. Hit that notification bell so you can be notified of when I'm dropping my daily live content. And who knows, depending on how the night shakes out, you might hear from me again. If not, 12 noon Eastern tomorrow with Sarah inside the vault. You know the drill. I appreciate you guys as always. Please join the Discord server if you haven't already done so by clicking on that link that I have included as a pinned comment in the live chat. You can also go to my show notes to get involved in that community as well. Thanks, guys. Talk to you in there.